My best friend tried to ruin my relationship, and now she's turned my family against me. My boyfriend John, 25M, and I, 25F, have been together for 3 years. Before we started dating, we were coworkers at a retail store when we were both 17. From the first time I met him, I noticed something unusual. He never smiled. His face always had this serious, unreadable expression, like he was lost in thought or just didn't care. He rarely showed any emotions at all. The best way I can describe it is to compare him to someone like Eminem or Shadow from Sonic, always looking intense and detached. Even when customers or coworkers would crack jokes, hoping to get a reaction out of him, he never laughed, which made things a bit awkward. But here's the thing, John was never rude. He was always respectful to the people around him, and I never once saw him raise his voice at anyone during his entire time working there. Our coworkers thought he was odd and even warned me to keep my distance. But despite their opinions, I didn't see anything wrong with him. In fact, we got along really well. I never cared that he wasn't expressive, and over time, we became good friends. Somehow he even managed to tolerate my loud, extroverted personality, which made me like him even more. Over the years, our friendship deepened, and every now and then I'd catch him smiling or laughing at something I said. When that happened, I couldn't help but tease him about it. Then, on my 22nd birthday, which also happens to be on Valentine's Day, he asked me to come over to his place, saying it was important. When I arrived, his house was decorated with flowers and lights, and he was dressed nicely, looking more nervous than I had ever seen him. He gave this long, heartfelt speech about how much he valued our friendship, how grateful he was to have met me, and then he asked me to be his girlfriend. It felt like something straight out of a 70s rom-com. His face was still as serious as ever, but I could tell how much effort he was putting into this. Of course, I said yes, and from that moment on, we've been a happy couple. Now, on to the real problem. My best friend Emma, 26F, and I have been close since 5th grade. Back then, we were practically inseparable, always getting into some kind of trouble together. When I met John, Emma and I weren't as close as before. She had moved to another city to live with her dad after high school, so she never had the chance to meet him. I told her about him, showed her pictures, and talked about him often, but her reaction wasn't what I expected. She once made an offhand comment about how strange it was that John never smiled in any of our pictures together. She even suggested that if he didn't look happy when he was with me, maybe I shouldn't be dating him. At the time, I brushed it off as her just being a protective friend, but now I'm starting to wonder if I should have paid more attention. Recently, Emma moved back to our city and wanted to meet John in person. She invited the two of us to dinner at a restaurant she and I used to frequent. The moment we arrived, she and I ran toward each other, screaming and hugging like little kids. John, meanwhile, just stood there and watched us, his usual expression unchanged. When Emma turned to greet him, I noticed a shift in her demeanor. Her excitement faded, replaced with something more guarded. She gave him a forced smile, shook his hand, and muttered a quick hi. John simply nodded and said it was nice to meet her. Then she turned back to me, completely ignoring him. Once we sat down and looked at our menus, John casually mentioned that nothing really appealed to him and that he'd just order an appetizer. That's when Emma unexpectedly snapped at him. Why? Is nothing here good enough for you? Why did you even agree to come if you weren't planning on ordering anything? She tried to say it in a joking way, but it was obvious there was hostility behind it. I immediately defended John, saying that he could eat whatever he wanted and that it wasn't a big deal. She didn't argue further, but I could feel the tension rising. Throughout dinner, she barely acknowledged John. When she did speak to him, it was only to ask questions that required a simple yes or no answer. And whenever he responded, she'd either glance at him with an unimpressed look or just say, "Okay then," before turning back to me. I knew she didn't like him, but I couldn't understand why. She wasn't openly rude, but her passive-aggressive remarks about how emotionless he was were hard to miss. At one point, she excused herself to the restroom. As soon as she was gone, I turned to John and asked if he was okay. He assured me he was fine and just wanted me to enjoy catching up with my friend. I apologized for how she was treating him, but he just shrugged and said he didn't care. I was relieved he wasn't hurt by it, but I still felt bad. After dinner, we decided to take a walk around town. Emma seemed to be in a better mood, laughing and chatting more. Then we came across someone walking a tiny puppy. Naturally, Emma and I melted, cooing over how cute it was. John, as usual, just stood there, observing. Once the dog owner walked away, Emma turned to John, her expression suddenly shifting from cheerful to furious. "How the hell could you not even smile for a puppy? Are you seriously that soulless?" I was stunned. I had no idea where that outburst came from. I started to say something, but before I could, John just shrugged and kept walking. His indifference seemed to anger Emma even more, but she took a deep breath and muttered an apology, claiming she didn't mean to yell. After that, the mood was completely ruined. Later, I needed to use the restroom, so I went into a store while John and Emma waited outside. When I came back, I found Emma screaming at him. She was hysterical, yelling, "It's not going to happen. I will never let this happen." I ran over, panicked, and asked what the hell was going on, but neither of them would answer me. Emma just kept repeating that John was a sociopath and demanding that I break up with him. I turned to John, but even he looked shocked. People were staring. I desperately tried to calm Emma down, but she wouldn't say what had caused her sudden outburst. Eventually, I told John to go wait in the car while I called Emma an Uber. Once we were alone, I begged her to tell me what had happened, but she just stayed silent. When John came back to pick me up, Emma shot him a death glare while he kept his head down, avoiding eye contact. The car ride home was painfully silent. When we got inside, I finally confronted John. I demanded to know what had happened between him and Emma while I was gone, but he just stood there, silent. His refusal to answer only made me more frustrated. Finally, he said he couldn't tell me, but he was sorry for what had happened. That only confused me more. Why wouldn't he just tell me? I was so overwhelmed that I told him I was sleeping in the guest room. I needed space to think. He simply nodded and told me he loved me before going to bed. Now here I am, lying awake, completely lost. Not long ago, I received a text from Emma. "Emma, I'm really sorry about what happened tonight, but please listen to me. You need to break up with John. He's a literal sociopath who is only using you. He doesn't deserve you. I'm telling you this because I love you and want to protect you. Please break up with him." I haven't replied. I know if I ask what happened again, she won't tell me. Reddit, what should I do? Why is neither of them giving me answers? Is this really just about John not showing emotions? Any advice would be appreciated. Edit. First of all, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to share their thoughts and advice. I truly appreciate it. Right now, I'm unable to sleep because my mind won't stop racing, so I wanted to clarify a few things. John is not a sociopath. The reason I shared the story of how he asked me to be his girlfriend was to show that he can be vulnerable and romantic in his own way. I didn't originally include this detail because I felt it wasn't my place to discuss, but given the situation, I think it's important to provide some background. John and his father never had a good relationship. Without going too much into detail, his father strongly believed that men should never show emotion. Because of this, John grew up suppressing his feelings, which is why he appears so emotionally distant. However, that doesn't mean he doesn't have emotions. He does smile, laugh, and even cry at times, just not as often as most people. Despite his reserved nature, he has always been kind, respectful, and loving toward me. He has never been abusive, nor has he ever raised his voice at me, not even once. Another thing I want to make clear is that, to my knowledge, Emma and John had never interacted before the dinner last night. That was their first official meeting. John has work today, so I won't be able to speak to him until tonight. My plan is to talk to him first before I reach out to Emma. I want to hear his side of the story before I make any decisions. Lastly, I want to apologize if my story was too long or difficult to follow. English isn't my first language, and this is my first time posting on Reddit. Thank you again for your patience and support. I'll update as soon as I can. Take care. Update. Hey everyone, I'm back with an update. Before I get into everything, I just want to thank those who took the time to read my story and offer advice. I truly appreciate it. After posting, I had time to sit down and really think about what had happened that night. Looking back, I realized I could have handled things differently. I shouldn't have let Emma's rude behavior toward John continue for as long as it did, and I let my frustration and anxiety take over when neither of them would tell me what had happened. That night, I decided I needed to hear John out first, so I didn't read any of Emma's messages. Instead, I turned off my phone, spent the day distracting myself by watching Reddit stories, learning how to use it better, and even going for a long run just to clear my mind. When John got home, I asked if we could talk, and he agreed. Following the advice of a kind Redditor, I started by apologizing. I told him I was sorry for walking away from him that night and for not standing up for him more when Emma was being awful. I reassured him that I love him, that I trust him completely, and that whatever he told me, I would believe him. After a moment of silence, John finally told me the truth, and some of you guessed it, he was planning to propose to me. While I was in the bathroom, he confided in Emma, telling her that he was going to propose soon and asking if she could help pick out a ring since she was supposed to hang out with us again later that week. At first, she asked if he was serious. When he said he was, she lost it. She started screaming at him, saying, "This engagement will never happen. You don't deserve her." That's when I walked outside and saw her yelling. To say I was shocked is an understatement. I hugged John right away and apologized again, asking if that was why he didn't want to tell me. He said yes. He had wanted the proposal to be a surprise. He also apologized for keeping it from me, saying that if he had known it would cause this much stress, he would have told me right away. I reassured him that this situation wasn't putting any strain on our relationship and that, if anything, I loved him even more now. We hugged it out and made up. Then John asked what Emma had said about the situation. That's when I admitted that I hadn't read any of her messages. I told him I had been too scared to see what she had to say. But eventually, I turned my phone back on. And honestly, I wish I hadn't. Emma wasn't bluffing when she said she wouldn't let this engagement happen. I have no idea how she could do this to me, but somehow she got our friends, my sister, my aunt, and even my estranged father involved. That was a low blow. For context, my father and I are no longer on speaking terms due to an incident involving my former stepmother. They're no longer together, but that situation completely destroyed any relationship I had with him. After reading through the messages from my family and friends, I realized Emma had gone to them and told them that I was dating a dangerous sociopath. She made it seem like she had tried to help me escape, but I was too blind to see it. Now, the people who once saw John as the sweet, loving person that he is suddenly think he's some kind of monster. They're begging me to leave him. I was, and still am, beyond furious. I spent the entire night trying to clear things up with everyone, except my dad. Unfortunately, my aunt and a few of my friends are still siding with Emma, which breaks my heart. Emma's messages were all over the place. Some were her begging me to talk to her, some were her furious that I was choosing John over her, and others were her apologizing for getting my dad involved, but insisting it was for your own good. I only sent her one response. Here it is, word for word. I don't understand how you expect me to take your side when you never even told me why you said what you said. John already told me what happened, and honestly, I can't even imagine what your side could be. I can't believe you lied to our friends and my family, and for you to involve my dad? How the hell do you even have his number? Above all, you disrespected my relationship and my boyfriend. Fuck you. After that, I blocked her. She never once explained why she refused to tell me what had happened that night. I still don't know what her real motive was, aside from wanting to break us up. This isn't the happy update I was hoping for, but despite everything, John and I are doing okay. He has been incredibly patient and understanding through all of this, and I honestly couldn't be more grateful for him. I know this situation isn't over yet, and I might have to update again soon. I just don't know how to fix this. How do I convince my friends and my aunt that John isn't the person Emma made him out to be? Should I try to get Emma to admit she lied? Thank you again to everyone who has supported me through this mess. And to the one Redditor who accused me of making this up and said I shouldn't be with someone like John. Listen, life can be way crazier than fiction, and unfortunately, situations like this do happen. John is one of the best things that has ever happened to me, and I can't imagine my life without him. So, yeah, screw you. Anyway, I'll update again if anything else happens. Take care, everyone. Hey, Reddit. I'm back again. Sorry for the wait, but I've got another update, and honestly, I wish I didn't. After my last post, John and I had a serious conversation about the mess with my family and friends. As some of you know, Emma had told my sister, my aunt, my estranged father, and several of our friends that John was an abusive sociopath and that I was refusing to leave him. I needed to know exactly what lies she had been spreading, so I invited my sister over and asked her what Emma had told her. What I learned made my blood boil. According to my sister, Emma claimed that while we were hanging out, John was acting distant, cold, and downright rude toward me. She said he had ignored me the entire night and even lashed out when I tried to talk to him. Supposedly, Emma then tried to save me by pointing out how toxic he was, but I had snapped at her, telling her to mind her own fucking business. Then, after I left, John apparently turned to her and casually announced that he was going to marry me. That's when she lost it and started yelling. So, aside from that last part, she told a big, fat, ridiculous lie. After getting confirmation from a few of our other friends, it became clear that this was the version of events she had been telling everyone. Both John and I were furious, him especially, since his proposal had been completely ruined because of this nonsense. Some Redditors, and my sister, suggested I gather everyone who had been misled and clear the air in person. So that's exactly what I did. I created a group chat with everyone who had reached out to me about John, excluding my dad and those I had already convinced. I told them we needed to have a serious face-to-face conversation to settle this once and for all. While I could have just texted them, I wanted them to see how serious this was. We all agreed to meet on Monday night. When the day finally came, I didn't hold back. I started by pointing out how quickly they had believed Emma over me. I told them how deeply hurt and disappointed I was by that. Then I laid out the real story, every single detail, word for word. I told them exactly how Emma had acted toward John, what she had said to him, and how she had lied to them all. Then I made something crystal clear. John was still the same kind, caring person they had always known. He was a good boyfriend, and I wasn't going to waste my time proving that to people who had chosen to believe a stranger over me. I ended by saying that if anyone tried to tell me to break up with John again or called him any more names, I would cut them off. Thankfully, it worked. They finally saw the truth. They apologized to me and, more importantly, to John for the way they had treated him. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. Thursday rolled around, and while I was at work, I got a call from our security team. Apparently, my girlfriend was there to see me. Yeah, I already knew who it was, but I went down to see her anyway. The last thing I wanted was for her to cause a scene, like she had with John. As soon as I saw her, she looked happy to see me. Meanwhile, I was absolutely livid. I told her to leave immediately, that she was never to come near me again, and that if she even thought about approaching John, I would call the police. That's when the crocodile tears started. She claimed that this was the only way she could talk to me. She told me that after I exposed the truth, everyone had turned against her. Most of our mutual friends had cut her off, and now she was all alone. I told her she deserved it for trying to destroy my relationship. She started apologizing, saying she didn't want to lose me, that she just wanted to explain herself. But by then, I was already done. I was embarrassed too because people were starting to stare as she raised her voice. I told her she had plenty of chances to explain herself before. Instead, she chose to spread lies and turn my family and friends against John. Again, she kept apologizing, saying she never meant for this to happen. I gave her one last warning, leave or I would have security escort her out. Shockingly, she actually left. But the nightmare wasn't over. The rest of my shift, I was on edge. I kept waiting for my boss to call me in to discuss what had happened, or worse, for Emma to come back. Then the messages started. A random number kept texting me, calling me a stupid BH and saying they hated me. I had no idea who it was, though. Based on the wording, I have a strong suspicion it was my father. Every time I blocked the number, a new one would pop up. When I got home, John was already there, waiting for me. He could tell something was wrong. The moment I told him what had happened, I broke down. I don't know why, but everything just hit me all at once. The stress, the fear, the anger, and deep down, a tiny, irrational fear that John might decide all of this wasn't worth it and leave me. But what did this incredible man do? He pulled me into his arms, reassured me that he wasn't going anywhere, and told me that the night I had stood up for him against my family, he had been smiling on the inside the entire time. To the Redditor who DM'd me saying I don't deserve John, you're right, I don't. I have no idea how I got so lucky. The calls and texts haven't stopped. I've been taking screenshots of everything before blocking each number, since I'll probably need to file a police report soon. Meanwhile, my sister and some friends think I should meet with Emma one last time and get her to finally admit what she's done. Maybe even figure out why she did all of this in the first place, John told me, to do whatever makes me feel safest. After thinking it over, I've decided to go through with it. I unblocked Emma and told her that I was willing to hear her out, but only if we met in a public place and she told me the full truth. That was hours ago. She still hasn't responded. And honestly, that scares me. I know most of you were probably hoping this update would be about Emma finally explaining everything, but unfortunately, we're not there yet. I really hope she agrees to meet up so I can finally understand why this all happened. What do you guys think? Should I go through with meeting her? And what are your theories on what she's going to say? Because my sister already has a ton of wild guesses. Before I go, I just want to thank all of you again. Your support and advice have been invaluable. I also want to clear up a few things. John is not abusive. Say it with me now. He has never raised his voice at me, let alone hurt me. Yes, we've had normal arguments, but what couple hasn't? John is my gentle giant. Seriously, the man is tall, and I refuse to let people paint him as something he's not. Is John autistic? I don't know. He's never been tested, and if he has, he's never told me. But that's his choice. Also, yes, he has tried therapy, but his past therapists weren't helpful. He is looking for a new one, though. Why haven't I heard Emma's side yet? Because she never told me. She had every chance to explain herself, but chose to lie instead. Hopefully I'll have more answers soon.